Everyone in my apartment building hears the elevator at night, but it never stops on our floor. I haven't slept in 3 days because of the elevator in my building. I need to write this down while I still can, while I still remember who I am. My name is Marcus Chen. I'm 28, and I've lived in the Bellamy Apartments for about 8 months now. It's one of those old buildings in the city that nobody talks about unless they're complaining about rent prices. 10 floors, maybe 60 units total, built sometime in the 1950s with that post-war brutalist aesthetic that makes everything look vaguely institutional. The kind of place where the radiators clank all winter and the paint in the stairwells is always peeling in exactly the same spots. I'm on the 7th floor, apartment 7G, and until about 6 weeks ago, I thought I'd gotten lucky with the place. Decent rent for the neighborhood, relatively quiet neighbors, and my unit faced away from the street, so I didn't have to deal with traffic noise. The only real annoyance was the elevator. Not that it didn't work or anything like that. It works fine during the day. The problem was the sounds it made at night. I first noticed it maybe 2 weeks after moving in. I'd been unpacking late, around 2 a.m., when I heard it, that distinctive mechanical groan of the elevator passing by my floor. The cables creaking, the slight vibration you feel through the walls when the car moves past. I didn't think much of it at first, someone coming home late from a bar shift or an overnight job. But then I heard it again 20 minutes later, and again maybe half an hour after that. I remember standing in my living room, a half-empty box of books at my feet, just listening. The elevator would rise past my floor with that same groaning sound, the cables singing their metallic song through the shaft. I'd wait for the sound of it stopping, that telltale thunk when it reached the floor, but it never came. It would just keep going up, past the 8th floor, past the 9th, all the way to the 10th. And then, nothing. And then, maybe 10 or 15 minutes later, it would come back down. Same pattern, passing every floor without stopping, that steady descent like something being lowered into a well. I tried to ignore it, told myself it was just someone on the 10th floor with insomnia riding the elevator up and down for some reason. But it kept happening, every single night, always starting around midnight and continuing until maybe 4 or 5 in the morning. I mentioned it to my neighbor, Mrs. Yamazaki in 7F, about a week later. We'd bumped into each other in the hallway, and she'd looked tired, dark circles under her eyes that I recognized from my own mirror. "The elevator," I said. "Does it keep you up too?" The way her face changed, I should have paid more attention to that. Her expression went from polite neighbor smile to something else, something careful. "You hear it too?" she asked, her voice dropping even though we were alone in the hallway. "Every night," I confirmed. "It's not a person," Mrs. Yamazaki said. She glanced toward the elevator doors at the end of the hall. "I've never seen anyone get on or off during those hours, and I've checked." She told me about a night 3 months ago when she'd gone into the hallway to catch whoever it was. The elevator came back down. I heard it descending, getting closer, but the doors didn't open. It went right past, and Marcus, she looked directly at me. There was no light coming from inside. The elevator cars have lights, always. I put my hand on the doors while it was passing. I could feel cold air coming through the crack. Not air conditioning cold, winter cold, like an open grave. I wish I'd listened to her. The next person I met was David Song from 7H, right at the end of the hallway. We ran into each other at the mailboxes, and he had the same exhausted look. "You just move in?" he asked. "About a month ago, 7G. Something flickered across his face. "That used to be the Petersons' place. They left in the middle of the night, just packed up and disappeared, left half their stuff behind." A cold feeling settled into my stomach. Why? Same reason everyone leaves this floor eventually. The sounds, the elevator. He glanced toward the lobby elevator. How close is your bedroom to the elevator shaft? I thought about my apartment's layout. Maybe 20 feet through the wall? That's bad. The closer you are, the worse it gets. The Petersons, their bedroom shared a wall with the shaft. Toward the end, Jennifer said she could hear things inside the elevator when it passed. Not just the machinery, breathing, and something else, like wet steps. That's insane. I've been living here for 3 years. I've seen 6 different tenants come and go from the apartments closest to that elevator. Nobody stays. Either they break their lease or they just vanish like the Petersons. Vanish? The unit next to yours, 7F? Ask Mrs. Yamazaki about the tenant that lived in your apartment before the Petersons, Robert Chen. He lived there for 6 weeks. Then one morning, his apartment door was wide open, all his stuff still inside. Security footage showed him leaving his apartment at 3:47 a.m., getting into the elevator, never showing him coming back out. The elevator never stopped. According to the logs, it went from the 7th floor down to the basement, except we don't have a basement, and Robert Chen was never seen again. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of fear, not yet, but because I was listening, really listening. The elevator started at 11:47 p.m. I was in bed, lights off, and I heard it begin to ascend. I counted. One floor should take about 5 seconds. I counted to 60 before the sound stopped. That didn't make sense. The building only had 10 floors. I got out of bed and went to my window. From the right angle, I could see the top of the building's roof. The elevator shaft housing stuck up above the roofline, and the indicator light was visible, a small panel that showed which floor the car was on. The light was on, but it wasn't showing a number. It was showing text. I grabbed my phone and zoomed in. The screen displayed words scrolling across like a message, and while I watched, the elevator began its descent. I counted again as it came down. The sound passed each floor, and when it reached the 7th, I heard something underneath the mechanical noise. A voice. It was faint, barely audible, but it was there. Someone whispering from inside the elevator car. I couldn't make out words, just the rhythm of speech. I stood at my window for another hour, watching that display. Every time the car reached the top, the display would show text, and every time it descended, I'd hear that whisper. At 3:33 a.m., the elevator stopped moving. The sudden silence was worse than the noise. I waited, watching that display. The text changed briefly, maybe on screen for only 10 seconds before going dark. 7G is listening. The next morning, I went to the building's manager's office. Frank Caruso, a heavy-set guy in his 50s, barely looked up when I complained about the elevator. Elevator's fine, passed inspection last month. It's running all night without anyone calling it. Elevator's old, makes noise. He clicked his mouse aggressively. You want quiet, move to the suburbs. Frank, look, other tenants have mentioned this. Something's wrong. Look, kid, this building's been standing for 70 years. The elevator's been running for 70 years. Sometimes the display glitches. That's what old systems do. It showed my apartment number, 7G. His face went carefully neutral. Those old LED displays, they burn out in weird patterns. Your brain fills in the rest. I know what I saw. Then you saw wrong. Elevator's fine, buy earplugs or break your lease. That afternoon, I researched the building's history. The Bellamy Apartments opened in 1953. What caught my attention was a gap in occupancy records for 8 months in 1955. I found the reason in old newspaper archives. Elevator accident claims life at Bellamy Apartments. A maintenance worker had died while servicing the elevator, falling down the shaft from the 7th floor. The victim's name was Thomas Bellamy, the same as the building. He wasn't just a worker. He was the building's original owner, had built it himself, named it after his family, and according to follow-up articles, he'd been found at the bottom with injuries that didn't match a simple fall. The coroner noted inconsistencies and extensive bruising, suggesting prolonged compression, like he'd been crushed slowly. The article quoted his wife saying Thomas had been hearing voices in the elevator shaft before his death, that he'd become obsessed with fixing something in the system, something he called the signal. He'd spent every night in the building, listening, and then he fell, or jumped, or was pulled. The 7th floor closed for 8 months after his death. That night, night 42, the pattern changed. The elevator began its routine at the usual time, but instead of passing